If we will pause for a moment, we'll check on the whereabouts of our distinguished.
Here she is.
My goodness, I couldn't have timed it better.
I've heard my name.
Now, Maisie, you know I went ahead only with permission.
Oh, of course. You always have that.
Well, we're delighted to see you, and we know you are very, very busy this afternoon and will have to leave to attend another very important matter. You are recognized.
So, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also, of course, like to welcome our witnesses for this afternoon's hearing. We are grateful for your service and for the professional service of the men and women who under your command. Today, we have an opportunity to discuss how the Department of the Navy's fiscal year 2018 budget requests for Navy and Marine Corps aviation programs would help increase readiness, huge issue for all of our services, address shortfalls in munitions, pilots, and maintenance personnel, and modernize our strategic deterrence capability. Navy and Marine Corps aviation programs play a critical role in supporting and advancing our country's strategic interests in the Indo-Asia Pacific region, including, of course, from bases in Hawaii. Last summer, I attended the dedication of the first of 2 new MV-22 hangars at Marine Corps Base Kaneohe. In April, 4 Ospreys operating from those hangars departed Kaneohe Bay for the Royal Australian Air Force Base Darwin after flying nearly 6,000 miles. This flight demonstrated how the operating range of our MV-22s and the strategic location of Hawaii permit us to reach across the Pacific Ocean to respond to the ever-growing threats in the region. These threats require us to consider how best to get the Navy and Marine Corps the resources that you need. But we must also make sure that any increases in resources do not come at the expense of important domestic programs that families, including our military families, rely on every day. In this request, the administration is asking for a $54 billion top-line increase above the total budget for fiscal year 2018, prescribed in the Budget Control Act, or BCA. Of that total, the Department of the Navy budget would receive an increase of roughly $12 billion. Unless Congress can achieve a broad and bipartisan agreement to repeal or modify the BCA, any approval of the $12 billion increase for the Navy and Marine Corps will trigger sequestration of a similar amount in domestic programs. And this increase would come at the expense of huge cuts to health care, environmental protection, and State Department programs critical to our national security. And I'd like to mention in that regard, like Hawaii's East-West Center. This is a non-starter. As Secretary Mattis said this morning, no enemy has done more damage to the U.S. forces than what we've done to ourselves with the BCA. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you and other members to eliminate sequestration in a way that balances the needs of our military with critical domestic programs. We cannot continue down this path. As we consider the fiscal year 2018 budget, we must also consider the significant challenges we face in naval aviation. While the Marine Corps has been operating the F-35B variant, we need to hear more about how testing on the F-35C is proceeding. We also need to understand better how other parts of the program are supporting the Navy's initial operating capability declaration plan for 2018, or OCD. In the budget, the Defense Department is also asking for authority to execute economic order quantity, EOQ contracts, with the F-35 program in advance of successful completion of operational testing. Normally, Congress has not approved EOQ authority unless and until the weapon system in question has completed a successful operational test, and we will have to consider this matter carefully. Second, the Navy is facing a major shortfall in its strike fighter inventory. The Navy responded to forecasts of a shortage of almost 200 aircraft several years ago by better managing the remaining life on the existing aircraft. They've done this by redistributing aircraft within the force, designing a series of maintenance and rehabilitation measures, including a service life extension program, or SLEP, for older aircraft, and buying new F-18 aircraft. The Navy has predicted that SLEP would lead to significant improvements in its ability to support operating forces. such as aircraft carrier squadrons and Marine Corps squadrons, for several years. This year, however, the Navy is still having difficulty moving F-18 aircraft through the SLEP lines, which means that fleet squadrons are having to make do with fewer aircraft. This puts a strain on the whole system. We need to hear about actions the Navy is taking to improve this situation. Navy and Marine Corps pilots have been experiencing problems with the environmental control systems in certain aircraft, mainly F-18s and T-45s, that have resulted in what is referred to as physiological episodes. We need to hear from the services what progress is being made to address those problems. I'd also like to hear about the investments the Navy and Marine Corps are making in training and maintenance operations. General Davis, yesterday at our meeting, I was encouraged to hear that Marine Corps Aviation has chosen to focus significantly on training and development for pilots and maintenance workers, both officers and enlisted personnel. Sending Marine aviators and maintainers to the Advanced Aviation Management Training course is a demonstration of your commitment to improving readiness and getting the aviation fleet back to where it needs to be. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I certainly look forward to hearing from our witnesses. General Davis and Admiral Miller, when Congress agrees to support an administration request for multi-year procurement authority, it is a serious matter. And this year, the Department is seeking authority to enter into contracts for economic order quantity items with the F-35 contract. EOQ contracting authority is typically limited to the programs that have been approved for multi-year contracting authority. So why is the department asking for a multi-year-like contracting authority when the F-35 program has not completed operational testing? And how can you assure us that this is a low-risk kind of authorization?
Senator, I'll take that one if I may. What we're specifically asking for is taking approximately 4% of the FY19 and 4% of the FY20 EOQ and pulling it forward and executing it with the FY18 EOQ. So it's a total across all the services, Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force, about $660 million that we would pull forward. That enables Lockheed and the other vendors, makers of the airplanes, the engines, et cetera, to go out and buy those long lead materials and get the economic order quantity cost savings. What outside agencies have told us, as well as our own calculations, the savings associated with pulling that money forward would be about $800 million across the three services for the aircraft, reduction in aircraft unit costs, because we're able to pull that relatively small amount of money forward. So it's not additional money. It's money that would already be spent in FY19 or FY20 for those lots of airplanes. It's only 4% of the EOQ in each one of those years, and it does not commit the services nor the Congress to actually buying a set number of aircraft in those years. So it is not a multi-year procurement from that extent. We are committing to absolutely nothing other than a cost savings.
Well, that's good. Because I was going to say, if we're committing to absolutely nothing, why do you even need authorization? But be that as it may. So we'll be talking with you further about that. I have a question regarding, this is for General Davis. The Commandant's unfunded priority list includes a request for 2 C-40A aircraft this year, similar to the request the Commandant made last year. And last year, the Congress provided 2 C-40 aircraft for the Navy in accordance with the CNO's unfunded priority list, but failed to address the Commandant's request. I understand that the current aging C-9 aircraft that the C-40s would be replacing are now, in the words of Reserve Commander Lieutenant General McMillan, hard down and not safe to fly. General Davis, do you agree that General McMillan's assessment, with his assessment, and if you agree that they are hard down and not safe to fly, why doesn't the budget request fix this problem?
Senator Hirono, thanks for the question. I would say the C-9s are not only hard down, but we've transitioned them out of the Marine Corps inventory. They're gone. The folks that were maintaining, we were the only people in the United States military flying those airplanes, those old C-9s. It's very difficult to get them parts, to get them worked on, and it was frankly we thought it was too much of a high-risk proposition to be flying our Marines around on those airplanes. So we transitioned them out. So they're out of the inventory now. We don't own them anymore. We have a lot of requirements. So the C-40s are on the unfunded priority list, but if you looked at our other inventory challenges, and as a nation's force and readiness, what we have to be able to do, we do need those C-40s, but we also need F-35s, we need 53 kilos, we need C-130Js, even more. So we are asking for the C-40s, but as far as on a rank order priority, at the end of the day, the nation needs the Marine Corps to be able to go forward. And I have no options for the jets. I have no options for the helicopters. I have no options for the C-130Js. So I had to put the priority there. It's not a perfect world, but we laid out what we thought we were going to be called on to do as a nation. But right now, to fill that mission, we count on the Navy to fly us around when they can. We use C-130s to go with the cargo seats, or commercial carriers to do the C-40 mission right now.
So with the C-9 aircraft out of your inventory, has that impeded the operational support aircraft mission flown by the Marine Corps Reserve?
It has the Marine Corps Reserve is flying the UC-35 and the UC-12, but for the bigger missions, and we transitioned VMR-1 down to be a reserve unit down there in Texas. We're waiting for airplanes to arrive. They're co-located with some of the Navy C-40s that are there, and looking for some help from this body to get those airplanes. It's just there's not enough money in our budget to cover down on everything, so they are on the unfunded priority list, ma'am.
And then would you consider the need for the C-40 replacements critical at this point for cargo and passenger movement?
They are critical for cargo and passenger movement, but also, too, we have warfighting requirements that have to be met as well, ma'am, and that's why they're not right at the top of the list.
You and I talked about the problem of corrosion, Admiral Miller, and this is something that Admiral Grosskлагs, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Close enough? Sorry.
Grosskлагs.
Grosskлагs. About 2 years ago, Rear Admiral Manazir, speaking before a conference here in D.C., said that the corrosion damage on the F-18 fleet was more than expected. Many Navy and Marine Corps airplanes and helicopters are grounded due to corrosion issues. As corrosion costs the department about $20 billion annually, it seems to make sense to provide for preventing corrosion where possible, including robust R&D work in this area. So can you tell me how the FY18 budget request impacts the department's corrosion program and what the Department of the Navy is doing in terms of meeting the challenges caused by corrosion, and are steps being taken in new acquisition programs to ensure that, to the extent possible, corrosion can be controlled or prevented?
I can tell you that there is not a specific RDT&E line or other line for corrosion prevention in our budget. There are funded corrosion efforts that are embedded in a number of lines. I'll give you at least one example from aviation, and we can go beyond that if you want. We fund today about 65 individuals that are called our corrosion maintenance readiness team. And those individuals are at every one of our fleet sites. And their sole purpose in life is to help the squadron maintenance professionals understand what they need to do in terms of corrosion prevention work on the aircraft in those squadrons. We've been doing that. We started that back in about 2011. We started with F-18s because of the very issue that you mentioned earlier. And we had gotten away from it. We had gotten away from doing that basic level of corrosion control at some of our squadrons. This has reinvigorated that, and we're starting to see the benefits. And so as we've been tracking this, what we have been measuring is the change in the number of corrosion hours that our depot artisans have to do on aircraft in areas that should have been done at the squadron level. And for those aircraft that we started this on several years ago, we are seeing a significant decrease in the labor hours at the depot. So we know we're having an impact, and it's worth the investment in this particular area. On the research and development side, I can also tell you we have about 9 ongoing projects with universities around the nation where we're involved in basic research on materials and coatings and that type of thing. We also have, as of today, about 60 funded projects that are being run. This was OSD money that was given to the services. We have about 60 projects that we are running with various organizations and companies around the nation, again, looking at materials, coatings, how to combine the two, and you know, how to stay away from I'm dropping sync on the word I'm looking for, but how to prevent dissimilar metal corrosion, even in cases where, from a technical aircraft structure aspect, it may make sense. And I'll give you an example. Our F-18Es and Fs, considerably greater use of composites, a titanium center barrel. These are as opposed to our F-18A through D, where we're seeing the problems that you mentioned earlier and that Admiral Manazar talked about. So on F-18E and F, we're seeing significantly less of that deeply embedded corrosion in the aircraft because we changed materials, we changed the build process, and we added corrosion protection into those aircraft as we built them.
I think it's really important that that you are paying attention to the corrosion issue because the lives of the lifetime use of our aircraft can be extended by that kind of attention to that matter. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.